Hello, Mr. Hill.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. How are you guys doing?
That's okay. Hello, Mr. Hill. Miss Harrison, how's that new grandbaby?
He's growing like a weed.
Is he? I know he's like too doggone cute.
Yeah, he's a big coat. He's getting to be quite the boy.
How does he weigh now?
Oh, I think he's probably up to maybe about 11 pounds, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's getting to be a big boy now.
And how's London doing being a big sister?
She's doing great. She is. She's loving every minute of it.
I'm glad. That's really nice that she does.
I think Dr. Francis has joined us. How are you, Martin? How are you, Mr. Leamy?
Evening, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
Dr. Rogers.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So this is what everyone looks like without masks.
Yeah,
That's right.
Okay, good.
Has been a while.
yeah, noses and mouths are still there.
All right, it is 6 p.m. and so we will go ahead and call to order this special called meeting of the Bedford County School Board. Tonight will look a little different due to some health concerns at the time that we originally scheduled this. We are meeting tonight virtually through Zoom, but hopefully we will be ready to be back together in person in time for our February 18th meeting. Ms. Johnson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Mrs. Kirby,
Here,
Mrs. Hairston,
Here.
Dr. Hicks? Dr. Hicks? All right, I see he's here. Mr. Hill?
Here.
Mr. Leamy?
Here.
Dr. Mealy?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Before we get into the substance of tonight's meeting, I needed to read a statement. In compliance with the Code of Virginia, oh, I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself here. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Kirby. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Harrison. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved unanimously. All right, that having been said, now I will read a statement. In compliance with the Code of Virginia, section 2.2-3712, parentheses C, the Bedford County School Board is announcing that it will be conducting closed meetings over the next 15 days at an undisclosed location solely for the purpose of interviewing candidates for the position of Superintendent of Schools. All right. And then I also had a few thoughts that I wanted to start with, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Rogers and her team to present the recommendation for tonight. Over the last couple months since we've been talking about sports, much has been said and written. Respectful debate and discussion is good and healthy, but sometimes it can veer off in a bad direction. Since our last meeting, an incident of vandalism occurred at one of our colleagues' homes. Bedford County Sheriff's Department has been notified and they are aware. If you are involved or you know anything about this incident, please reach out to the Sheriff's Office. But I do want to emphasize that violence and vandalism are never acceptable solutions to political disagreements. Just want to repeat that again. Violence and vandalism are never acceptable solutions to political disagreements. The next generation of Bedford County's leaders are watching us tonight, not just us, but all the members of our community. And it's up to us to be good examples for what kind of government they want. They certainly don't always get that from Washington or Richmond, so it's on us. So as we as a board and we as a community continue this debate and dialogue, let's please keep it between the lines so that we can set a good example for the kids of our community. All right, with that, Dr. Rogers, I know you and your team have been very hard at work for the last couple of weeks. Would love to hear your recommendation on this.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm pleased to be here tonight to present a recommendation to allow Bedford County athletes to play competitive fall and spring sports within the confines of a collaborative plan to safely play and compete. Since the majority of these sports are played outdoors, with the exception of volleyball, which does not have the level of direct contact of many of the other sports, we feel that increased mitigation protocols combined with fresh air make competition possible. In addition, the current metrics in Virginia and Bedford County, while still high, seem to have stabilized and are rapidly declining. Please be aware that while we had hoped that the vaccinations would have been completed for our staffs by the end of February, the very limited supply of vaccine in Central Virginia has made this goal impossible. However, we believe that first doses will be completed by the end of February and second doses before spring sports begin. In order to keep students and staff who will have concerns about increased exposure as safe as possible, a large committee of educators from all three zones, including principals, athletic directors, athletic trainers, teachers who are also parents, and senior staff representing transportation, school health, instruction, and operations have developed a comprehensive mitigation proposal that goes above and beyond the recommended VHSL protocols. Please note that while we believe these protocols will enhance safety if closely followed, they will not guarantee safety. And we will deal with sickness and outbreaks on a case-by-case and team-by-team basis, just like we are currently doing at the schools. You will note that various restrictions such as limited number of bus drivers, the CDC guidelines, and the current governor's orders restricting numbers of people in gatherings have impacted our plan such that it is only able to schedule varsity sports competitions at this time. While this is not ideal as far as including all students in growing athletic programs, it at least addresses our goal to allow older students and especially seniors the opportunity to compete. Dr. Woodford and Dr. Francis will explain the recommendations in further detail and outline the highlights of the plan. Dr. Dewis will be able to answer transportation related questions. In addition, as a central office group, we have heard from most of you school board members and have considered your concerns as well as community suggestions. And Dr. Francis will address some modifications that we're able to make to the initial plan. Please understand that if these modifications are accepted, we cannot say definitively that they were agreed upon by the entire group, although in most cases we had extensive discussions about the modifications initially in the larger group meetings. At this time, I would ask that everyone hold your questions until the presentation is complete, and perhaps many of them will be answered. And at this time, Dr. Woodford, will you please share information regarding the collaborative process for the development of this plan?
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, and thank you, board members. We have shared the proposed plan for fall and spring sports with you to review. I appreciate all of you that have called to talk through different items in the plan and just to hear our thought processes as we worked as a team. I do want to share that a very large group worked on this plan, and as Dr. Rogers mentioned, the group consisted of all 3 high school principals, all 3 high school athletic directors, all 3 high school athletic trainers, the executive team, Dr. Francis, Mrs. Robertson, and Mrs. Smith. We also asked that different people review the document. So it was reviewed by Mrs. Knox to ensure we met all the health mitigation strategies, to ensure student and staff safety. And we also asked the high school principals to gather input from teachers at each of their schools. The group initially met on January the 25th and met for several hours. And then we had a follow-up meeting on January the 27th. We also had a shared Google document that all of the team members could add information to and input at any time. There were many major decisions that the team was asked to make. And to ensure that we had consensus, we asked that everyone indicate their support or concerns as we went through the process. So each of our major elements were actually voted on by the group. And I'm happy to say that every decision that the team made, we had great discussions with from multiple perspectives. And in the end, we all came to unanimous consensus in this document. As Dr. Rogers shared, we did meet as a smaller group to discuss some of the concerns we've heard from you and from the community. And Dr. Francis will be sharing more information about that as he shares the highlights of the plan. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Francis to share the highlights and the big things that we voted on in the plan.
All right, let's try this again. Good evening, members of the board. I am going to go through the plan and kind of hit some of the highlights of it. Obviously, this plan is very extensive, so I will not be covering every point. But if you have questions at the end, we'll be happy to answer those based on anything in the plan. But I'm going to start and kind of go through the plan the way it's broken down. The first area is contact tracing. One of the big points there is athletes must disclose to school personnel, if they have symptoms or have been exposed, and failure to do so would result for dismissal from the team. And that is imperative to keep everyone safe and healthy. There is an athletic agreement that must be signed, and it does state that athletes cannot participate in travel sports. This was put in after lengthy discussion due to the potential spread when you compete outside of the state and at different regions, and that we felt like this would give us the best chance to keep teams healthy. Some general operations, in-season weightlifting will be done in cohorts, just as it's being done in the classes, so that we can minimize exposure, and it will assist in contact tracing. Athletes will have individual water bottles. We will provide 8-ounce disposable one-use water bottles to supplement that, so people are not filling water bottles and handing them off and so forth. There will be no eating on the buses, and only prepackaged meals that are prepared by individuals trained in COVID food preparation will be allowed for the teams. Mask requirements. Athletes and coaches are required to wear a mask at all times unless competing in a contest. Masks must be labeled, and only the student or individual whose name is on that mask can handle the mask. We will also have disposable masks available for coaches and athletes if they lose a mask or it's not unable to be worn. We also require all workers and spectators to wear a mask at all times. One of the big questions that was raised is about volleyball, and since that's an indoor sport, could we require athletes to wear a mask or face coverings during competition? The VHSL clarified that yesterday on their webinar, and they did indicate that a local school board can require both the home and visiting team to wear a mask to compete. One caveat there is a visiting team may opt not to play, and it would be a no contest. But that could be put in so both teams, while they're playing on our facilities in the regular season, not the postseason, could be made or could be required to wear a mask. Screenings. All athletes with a fever of 100 degrees or higher will not be allowed to participate. That means they can't travel, practice, or compete. If an athlete develops a temperature after leaving the school for an away event, the parent of that athlete will be required to come to the away venue and pick up that player. There will be a staff member that is assigned to supervise the student in an isolation area until the parent arrives. If the parent does not come or refuses to come to pick up their child, then that student would be dismissed from the team for future events. All visitors from visiting teams will have their temperatures taken when they're arriving at the venue. Screening questions will be provided in accordance with those established by Bedford County Public Schools. A member of the school staff of an ill player will be responsible for that player when they're in the isolation area, and all 3 of our high schools will set up an isolation area for any players that may become ill when they arrive. Spectators. Sideline cheer are considered spectators by the governor's order and the VHSL. VHSL indicated that they have asked, but that has not been changed, and basically it told us not to ask anymore. However, we will allow sideline cheer at the home football games, and they would adhere to all screening protocols. And this decision was based on the fact that there is no other venue for sideline cheer. That is their only venue, is to perform during the typically a football game in this situation. Based on the rules that established with the governor's order, the visiting team will be allowed the same number of spectators that the home team has, and they can use their allotted tickets in any manner that they choose. So example, if a school has 20 cheerleaders, the visiting team would be allotted 20 tickets. They can bring their cheerleaders, they can bring parents, they can, however they choose to allot those 20 tickets, but they get the exact same number of tickets for spectators as we're allotting based on our cheer squad. One question that has been raised about bands. Bands are considered spectators and would not be allowed at the contest at this time. Excuse me. One of the big challenges here is that bands do have virtual competitions. And it would be very difficult for them to perform while they are in a outdoor venue that's very cold. Excuse me. We did talk to the band directors at the school, and they seem to be okay with this plan. Staffing needs. A nurse would be hired to provide direct support for the athletic trainers. Additional custodian support would be hired for home games. There is also a cleaning protocol checklist that would be signed off by the custodian and the school administrator. Team levels. In this plan, it's a varsity only would participate and practice in competitions. Some questions that have been raised about modifying that. One modification could include expansion to include JV teams practicing and the possibility of playing in county contest if transportation was available. The consensus with the team decided was they did not feel middle school participation could be done due to transportation, additional cleaning protocols, and so forth. One contest could be designated as senior night, and senior athletes would be allowed 2 guests, and schools would submit a plan for approval to ensure safety protocols are followed for senior night. Of course, these modifications may require additional staff to assist with cleaning and monitoring. One idea was that middle school coaches, excuse me, could be trained to assist with monitoring protocols and practice at the games. Under transportation, the transportation department will assign drivers for athletic events to ensure contests are scheduled centrally. Any volunteer coaches with a CDL would have to meet the same requirements as a CDL licensed driver employed by the county. When traveling to away games, an adult would drive separately, mileage paid to that adult in case there's an emergency with a sick athlete, and additional PPE will be bagged and will travel with the team. Teams must ride the bus to events. Parent transport is not permitted due to the fact that we cannot control the number of athletes in a vehicle, the application of safety protocols, and equity across the division. Players would be able to ride home with their parents and would be released only to their parent, and that would be cleared with the coach, and we would keep a list of any students that did not ride the bus back to the venue. To limit the number of buses needed for travel, any team over 40 would have to designate a travel team so that we would only use 2 buses. The central office maintenance department has ordered, and they have arrived with electrostatic cleaners, 1 for each athletic department. Face shields have been ordered for football players so that they can integrate that mask to help reduce the amount of spread as well. So those are the highlights. I'm sorry I got to a coughing fit there, but we'll be happy to answer any questions based on the plan, and the appropriate staff member can weigh in if you have specific questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Leamy, yes, sir.
I just want to make sure I understand that the reason the JV and middle school are not or included in this plan is due to transportation. Is that correct?
I can answer that. That's not the singular reason. One of our big reasons for the B team is that students would be traveling between schools during the day to practice, and we would be crossing student populations. We also, transportation is a pretty major issue in the spring with practice, not only traveling outside the division to competitions, but we also have to transport teams to practice fields because there are so many spring sports. And we were also concerned about the number of students at practice that will be crossing in locker rooms. The more people we add to the mix, the harder it is to contact trace and to ensure mitigation. And I will say that our team was very specific about B team, that it was not worth the risk for our B team players. And as Dr. Francis mentioned in our smaller group today, we did feel like we could manage JV, especially in county competitions, but we are very limited on transportation and the number of drivers we have to transport because we can't put as many kids on buses because of social distancing.
Mr. Chairman,
are you talking transport between competition locations and the home school, or help me understand that? Because I mean, we haven't spent any money in the winter, obviously, for transportation, and you know, I'm sure there are charter companies out there that are chomping at the bit for business to transport kids to games. So I mean, is this something we've explored?
I would have to ask Dr. Dewis to talk about transportation, so I'll let him answer.
Thank you. We have 14 drivers currently of our current fleet of drivers or group of drivers who have traditionally driven extracurricular activities. Not all of them are available every day. And so we're dealing with some number less than that of our regular drivers. We are going to post positions to try to recruit people who may just want to drive extracurricular only routes, maybe recently retired drivers or others who just that works, the evening works with their schedules. So we'll try to boost that number up. We have not explored charter options for games at this point. Certainly we could try to price that. I know that what we've seen with field trip costs over the last several years makes that a pretty expensive proposition, but I don't have numbers for that, and we certainly could do more homework.
Okay, I think that's a good idea because the transportation industry, in terms of especially tourism, has really, to use the vernacular, taken it in the chops. And I would think this is worth exploring, to reach out to some charter companies and say, hey, I know you're not going to Gatlinburg or Atlantic City anymore due to COVID. Would you be interested in transporting student athletes to competitions?
I think once we have schedules and really sit down and match drivers to competitions, we can see the gap there, if there is one, and try to supplement it best we can with recruitment and looking at some of those other options.
Okay, but the way I understand the proposal as presented, JV is not being considered for competition, therefore they don't have any schedules. Am I correct on that? Somebody?
Dr. Francis?
Yeah, that would be correct as far as out of county scheduling. If we did JV, we would schedule games within the county, which we can kind of control everything as start times and the days that they play and those type of things. So yeah, JV would not be going to, say, Campbell County or anything like that.
No, understood. But we need to get these kids out of the house, get them out in the sunlight, get them some vitamin D and away from the Xbox, and get them some physical activity. Even if that's intra-county competition, I mean, we need to get these kids out and let them play.
That was one of the modifications there for you to consider, was the JV to practice and to possibly play some inter-county games. That would give them a few games anyway to kind of look forward to and work toward. So that is a possibility.
Mr. Lee, if I can interject real quick with a question, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but usually schedules are fixed or set a couple of seasons ahead. So why all of a sudden was our fall season not scheduled? Because you said we didn't have a schedule, but I know teams put out their schedules at least a half a year ahead, if not more, or set the schedule. So why all of a sudden do we not have a schedule?
I can answer that. The districts are currently working on the schedules based on the fact that some divisions can only play in county, some divisions can play a full schedule, some can't play at all. So they're reworking all of those schedules. The schedule that we had for, say, varsity football with 10 games and contracts is gone because the VHSL indicated you could only play 60%, which is 6 games. They had to redo the whole district schedule, and they actually did that, I believe, looking at that last week at the Seminole, because they had to plan on if teams were not going to compete or if teams were only going to compete within their county so that they could modify and adjust their schedule. So they've adjusted those schedules to meet the needs of the district. And as I said, in the Blue Ridge district is one in particular where Roanoke County is going to decide on February 14th, I believe, if they're going to play in county only or a full district schedule. Well, that schedule will have to be redone if they play in county only, because then they can't play the other schools in Botetourt and so forth.
But you said a key word. You've reworked a schedule. So there was a master schedule that has since been edited, correct?
Basically, that master schedule's gone because of the fact that the reduction of the games and the fact that some schools in the district can play, some can't, or some can only play in county. So that the ADs have had to rework all of those schedules based on the availability, just like colleges are doing now. UVA was supposed to play Louisville this Saturday. They're going to play Pixelot.
I get it. Yeah, I get that, and that was the whole general concept of what we wanted to do with Stanton River in the Blue Ridge district and playing that over and getting them as many games as possible. But if we already had somewhat of a master schedule, and I understand transportation being an issue, but why can't we play our home games? The games that were already scheduled to be at home, have the other teams travel here. We don't have to worry about transporting our players. They're already here.
An AD will not schedule you that way. They're not going to schedule and leave a hole in their schedule. They're going to want a home and away. So what happens is, say on volleyball or some of these other sports, they won't schedule only a away game because that leaves a hole. They'd rather play someone twice, home and away, so that they don't have a hole in their schedule.
Well, I understand that for volleyball because you play everybody twice, but football, you just play them one time. So why can't the JV and we explain, if everybody is so lenient and willing to work with us, why can't we explain to the other teams in the Seminole or Blue Ridge district that we do have transportation limitations and therefore you can come to us and we don't have to travel. It's not written in stone that JV has to play on Thursday. They can play on Wednesday, Tuesday, whenever we have availability, or even on a Saturday. But they can come home and explain to the other teams if everybody's being flexible, because like I said, football just plays each other one time. Volleyball plays twice.
Right.
Why wouldn't that be an option?
Well, that would have to be that the district or the individual schools would have to agree to. Some may not.
But some may, so that would open us up to games, correct?
Possibly, but then you do have, you could do that, yes. If the other teams agreed and the other ADs agreed and said, we'll come to you for a JV game, say for football. It's really not going to, as I said, work for volleyball because of the home and away, but
and I get that, but JV football, yeah, I mean, possibly. Why not?
They possibly in county games and possibly if a school would agree to come and play them at our venue, yes.
Okay, well, is that something that could be explored and we could find out how that would possibly work out?
I think so. I think that's something that could be explored for JV. Sure.
Okay. Yes. I would like to hear that if at all possible. I'm
I mean-
sorry, Mr. Leamy. I apologize for interrupting.
Okay, I'm used to it, Ms.
You
Garvey.
should be.
God bless you. No, but it sounds to me like that JV competition is within our span of control, and we can make that happen. I think we need to look, explore all avenues to ensure that these kids have the opportunity to, to compete. So, let's go for it.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I believe I heard Mr. Hill. Did you try to jump in and then Ms. Harrison? Because I think I heard two simultaneous voices.
I did, but I don't know. Go ahead, Ms. Harris,
Okay.
and I'll follow you.
Okay, so Ms. Harrison.
Okay. My question is to Dr. Francis. It's regarding the shields that you made mention of for the football players, protective shields. I'm thinking about the volleyball. And of course, we are requiring in the recommendation for masks to be worn. My question is, for volleyball, which is better?
Yeah, well, actually in our recommendation, we're not requiring volleyball. That was something that was asked, but we could. I think probably what I've heard from most people is the net gaiter type covering, because it tends not to fall off, straps don't get caught. So it seems to be the best for competitions. I did witness some actual basketball competitions where students were wearing face coverings, the traditional mask and the gaiters. One of the things with the traditional mask is the loops and so forth can get hung or they can fall off, whereas the gaiters really don't do that. So I think the gaiter probably is a more secure covering, but if a student, if that was required and they felt more comfortable with the face mask, they can wear that.
Okay. So are we requiring the volleyball players to wear masks? Am I understanding we're not?
That was not, but it was a question,
Okay.
Could we? And so at the time that we put this plan together, the VHSL had indicated we could not require visiting teams to do it. But now, since yesterday, they've clarified that for regular season, we can require both teams, which keeps people on a level playing field.
Okay.
So that's for your consideration if you would want to put that in. Since volleyball is the one fall sport that is indoor, even though there's no body-to-body contact, it's still an indoor sport.
And there's quite a bit of distance too with the volleyball players that I think we can certainly take that under consideration as well.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You, Mr. Hill.
Yeah, so as far as transportation, Mac, have we taken into consideration that there are athletes who can drive themselves, which would reduce the total number of buses required for that travel?
The team did discuss that, or in addition to allowing parents to drive if they weren't old enough to do that. I think for a couple of reasons that didn't have support among the team. One, because there would be less control over mixing. Would more than one ride together? Would a car pile up and bring lots of kids at a time? And secondly, just making, we didn't want that to be the only avenue because of just equity concerns. Not everyone's parents would be able to get off of work in time, bring them, might not have adequate transportation, but those were the reasons discussed.
Right, but we could certainly require them to sign that not multiple students would ride together, correct? Sort of like, forgot, no travel sports, having to sign that document. Couldn't we also require a waiver that says if you drive yourself, you're only allowed to drive just yourself?
Dr. Francis, is that something, I mean, what, did the team discuss that in any detail?
The team did discuss that, and it came down to the fact that we really can't monitor that. And they felt more comfortable with us providing the transportation. And it was also an equity issue because some people have children old enough to drive and have vehicles, some don't. And so it would create inequity between schools as far as that. So I can let Dr. Woodford, Dr. Rogers also speak to that. That was more of a, I think, an equity and safety issue because of the fact that, especially for large teams like football and those type of things, that could be a major issue. You know, we did talk about the fact that for smaller, like golf and some of those, we could rent, do the rental as far as the SUVs and some of those type of things, which could help with that because, you know, if you have 8 golfers, you could rent a couple SUVs and maybe spread them out and do that. So, but I can let Dr. Woodford or Dr. Rogers address anything else with that as far as, you know, really the team didn't feel comfortable with students or parents driving.
So we're comfortable to let them drive to school every day, but we're not comfortable to let them drive to a sports event.
I think we're just going on what the team talked about. That there was a large discussion about parents driving students. The fact that if they drove them to away games, they may not even be able to get in as spectators. Again, we talked about the carpooling, the concern that coaches had that their students are actually there on time, ready to, you know, get ready for the game, that they are coming in under screening protocols, that we've been able to check temperatures. Again, I think that any large decisions over what Dr. Francis has kind of shared, we would feel like we would need to go back to that large team and rediscuss because we would really be going out of the bounds of what we agreed to as a large group, because that was a large discussion about a couple of things. The JV teams being in competition outside the county. I feel like we need to go back to the team and discuss that because there's a lot of mitigation there. It's not just about transportation, it's also about control and mitigating, mixing, and the more people we put into the mix, the harder it is. And I think we would have to go back about the transportation. I feel like the team was very concerned about any transportation outside of what we provided. Again, I'm happy to go back and talk with the team. I'm not comfortable making a decision without them.
Yeah, and again, I'm just trying to make recommendations. I hear that we have some concerns around transportation. So just want to make sure that all avenues have been looked at. Speaking of large team, and I don't know who answers this, I'm interested to know of this team, how many athletes, students, parents were on that board?
We did not have students on the board. We met during the school day for the most part. Of course, we had heard from many, many students over winter sports. So we thought we had a good idea of what they wanted or what students wanted as far as athletes. And I didn't have the number of parents, but the teachers that were there were parents and parents of athletes. Dr. Woodford, did you have the number?
We had 2 parents that I know of have athletes, and they really gave feedback based on the fact that they had either had students who were athletes or currently have students who are athletes, and the fact that they are also teaching face-to-face every day. And they felt like the plan was fair and it ensured the staff safety and allowed students to play. And I will say the team talked a lot about, our goal was to try to create a plan that would let as many students play sports as possible, because I think we do feel like we've heard from parents and we've heard from students in public comment and emails that they wanted to play. And so our goal was to try to do as much of that as we felt like we could in a safe environment.
Thank you, Dr. Woodford. My only last question would be around bus drivers, and I know Mac mentioned, you know, we had 14, possibly 10 that were willing to drive. Have we thought about an incentive pay, so additional pay as to what we normally do hourly rate to try to incent some of those drivers to sign up?
I'm not sure the team talked about that. That certainly is a strategy that could be used. I think we're going to continue to try to recruit and encourage. Once the board, makes a plan tonight, approves a plan, we'll have our marching orders and can get to work on that. Pay is part of it for drivers. Some folks, just have small kids and can't get out at night. Some have a second job that they do in the evenings. Some, have other things that don't consider, but pay is certainly one incentive for sure. And I know that we've discussed it, but we can.
Your questions from board members?
Okay, Mr. Johnson, I have several. I was just kind of waiting to be the tail end. So as you can imagine, I have several.
You?
Yeah, go figure. On the committee that got together, everybody that got together to make these decisions, my big question is, why weren't middle school athletic directors included? Because it's easy to eliminate your middle school sports when you don't have a middle school athletic director there defending them.
We had previously spoken to middle school principals who had communicated with their ADs, and they were all very concerned about trying to do B team. Again, the more people we put into the mix, the more chance that we might cause illness, or that we would have teams who would be exposed and we would end up quarantining. Again, there's a lot of movement with B team. The other thing, as an athletic director at the high school, they really work with the scheduling of the B team, and they work closely with the B team athletic directors, the middle school athletic directors. And they assured us that there was really no desire to try that when we first opened up the plan. And I want to just say, remember, there is that caveat that as we are working through things, if we see that we have more transportation, if we see that we can add things, we definitely can do that in the spring. Again, we felt like we had that input from the middle school athletic directors and the middle school principals, and the high school athletic directors. Again, they work very closely with the middle school ADs, and unanimously said we shouldn't try to stretch ourselves that thin.
But we did it with basketball. We had, and granted they were just practicing, but eighth graders or middle school, excuse me, middle school could practice and not worry about competition, but we at least need to have them practice because we can't take anything away from these families.
Well, the only concern we have with that is that, again, we're talking about transportation to
And
offsite
I get that. I get that.
and we're adding more kids to the mix. The other piece is that if we give them, if we put them on a team to practice, then they can't play travel ball. So we did not want to make that decision to remove them because we were pretty sure that transportation is going to be a huge issue. And we cannot guarantee that they'll be in any competition, even in county. And they would have to sign that agreement that they're not traveling. So we did not want to take them away from their ability to do rec sports or travel sports. And so that was our thinking on those lines. And Dr. Francis may have more on that, but that's really what the group talked about their concerns were, other than, again, just mitigating that many students practicing every day on that many fields and areas.
Well, who made the decision that they couldn't do travel ball while they were playing? And how many other counties around us are doing that? I mean, are we the only one again that's taken away from the kids or putting in such strict guidelines?
That was a suggestion again from the team. And I think also from some of our board meetings where it was mentioned that, students were willing not to travel if they could just play sports in county. Now, I think Dr. Francis will tell you that there are not a lot saying no travel. Some of the high school ADs, when we talked about travel, because I might be wrong, but I think they actually brought up their concerns. And I will say that the teachers who reviewed the plan had also been very concerned about travel because they had seen students traveling and there were positive cases coming back with coaches who were traveling in the winter and students who were traveling, and that was affecting practice. And so, again, I don't know if any other counties are banning travel, but it was a suggestion from the team that we talked about, and everyone unanimously said, yes, we need to do that. So we put it in the plan.
Okay, now, am I right that the fall sports, we're looking at volleyball, football, and cross country? Is that correct?
And golf and competition cheer.
Golf and competition cheer.
Yes.
So,
And
okay,
sideline
do we actually have enough kids for middle school golf, or are they just automatically, do they have to hold off? I mean, are there enough middle school kids to warrant a middle school golf team?
We don't have a middle school golf team.
Okay, so that one's eliminated from the mix.
Yeah, we don't have
football. Yeah, football. I can understand going from field to field. You have to go where you have the facilities. I get that.
The only three we would have there would be middle school football, middle school volleyball, and middle school sideline cheer.
Okay, so why can't we do that? And because, well, I understand football because I'm picturing Liberty's campus. Now, of course, I know our middle schoolers could walk to the fields being so close. So that would eliminate the transportation because if we're going to be outside to practice anyway, they can walk over. But middle schools, all of them have their own gym. Why can't we take this on a sport to sport consideration? Volleyball can be in their own gym. And the middle school won't contaminate the high school. I mean, we just played. We had boys basketball and girls basketball B teams practicing. Let these girls practice volleyball inside. Let the cheerleaders, I mean, you can go in a cafeteria there in your own school. You don't have to go to the high school. You don't have to cross-contaminate.
Well, they are at the high school. Their seventh and eighth graders are at the high school. So 95% of the people that would be on the team, very few sixth graders would make a team typically. It would be a few, but most of those students are seventh and eighth graders. So they are at the high school. So they would have to come to the middle school. Also, all of your eighth graders are eligible for JV. So they could play on the JV squads or be included in that. But yeah, the problem, as I said, one of the challenges we face is the 7th and 8th graders are not at the middle school. It would be a lot easier if they were there. They could just stay there and practice, but they would be going into a different school, and you have to get them there, transportation, those type of things. And then you have more cleaning that you have to do. And then they would be going back to the high schools for their academics. So I think the team weighed all of those options and felt like, those younger athletes, 8th graders could play JV, 6th graders and probably 7th graders could play rec and some of those things. But that was kind of the thinking.
Well, the problem we have with these kids playing rec is we have voted as a board to not allow the rec departments to use our facilities, so they don't have anywhere to play. And they are in different seasons. Right now they're doing basketball, but our high schools are in football. So, I mean, you don't have your options there. And with travel, not every family can afford travel. And to be honest with you, and I know a lot of families would rather have their kids practicing in some fashion, even though they don't get to play, instead of having them, and excuse my old language because I'm old and that's what I use, but instead of having latchkey kids that sit home in front of an Xbox.
I do want to just point out, and I'm sorry, Mrs. Kirby, I hope you were finished. I hope I didn't.
Now, you can interrupt. I'll pick back up. Don't worry.
I just wanted to say, I think our athletic directors and athletic trainers, the other piece that was really, really important is that they felt like when coaches are coaching and practicing, it's harder for them to make sure that the mitigation strategies are followed, that there is, cleaning, that the kids, when they come off the court, are putting their masks on. And we were seeing, when we were contact tracing with those practices, we were having to quarantine larger groups of kids because the coaches were focused on coaching and practice. And so part of our discussion was that the athletic trainers and athletic directors would be moving between those practices, encouraging and supporting those mitigation protocols. And I think they felt like they could not say 100%, we guarantee that people are following protocols, because they wouldn't be able to get to everybody, especially traveling between middle schools and high schools and other practice fields. So I want to say, I think that the protocols for mitigation and trying to keep the kids who are playing safe was a big reason that they wanted to limit it to smaller groups of kids playing. So I just want to throw that out as another piece.
Well, here's a thought I just had to hearing you talk. Is it feasible then at this point? Because we have paid we voted to pay these coaches full stipends. And I totally hear what you're saying, and I get it, okay? But I also get that we have 6th and 7th graders who are going to be our building blocks for our varsity programs later on, and this is where we need to capture their attention. Is it possible, since we've already paid our coaches, or we're going to pay our coaches, to possibly run day clinics on a Saturday, or run clinics with these younger kids instead of saying have a set practice? Let's say on Saturday, or the parents will bring the kids to school, they can go through their screenings, go in, and then have a clinic, because I know I run tennis clinics quite often, and say go from 9 to 12 and have a clinic to get these kids interested to where they will continue the next year, and just saying, no, you're not getting anything.
We can definitely take that back to the committee to discuss. I think the other piece is we're having a hard enough time trying to get custodians to work the after school games and all of that. So again, you would be asking, there would have to be an administrator there. There would have to be extra custodial help doing overtime on a Saturday to make sure things were covered. And I will say, one of the things we did think about with our middle school coaches, because we were paying them the stipend, is to really get them to help us be what we were kind of calling mitigation or protocol coaches, so that they could go up and help the JV or varsity practices, and really not be focused on practicing, but focused on cleaning and making sure the kids were following and not grouping. So we kind of had thought about how we could use the middle school coaches. But again, I'm not opposed to taking it back to the group and just seeing what they say about that.
Well, let's do, because we've got to capture these kids. I mean, we just can't let them go by the wayside. And I can tell you right now, we're going to get some lashback on the fact that 6th and 7th graders can practice basketball, and now we're not letting them practice anything. And something was mentioned too, and I'm just curious about this one. With the no eating on the bus, and the kids can only eat meals that are done by COVID trained food prep. What is COVID trained food prep?
That would be our cafeteria workers or any of those things that you would buy, say, at a catering company, that type of thing. Not what parents get together and start making sandwiches and wrapping them up and putting them in and so forth. So
basically they can't come from home, but they have to be like commercial.
Yes. So
could a parent go buy a bag of cheeseburgers from McDonald's and bring them? Would that be considered sufficient? I mean, I'm just curious.
Yes.
I'm not pushing any issue here. I'm just
curious.
As
long as something like that, like a venue where they're serving to the public and they've been trained. So we talked about using our cafeteria or something like a Chick-fil-A or something like that.
Okay.
So that what happens is that you reduce the risk of if you have a group of people get together to make the food, and they would eat the food before they left and so forth, and they can spread out in the cafeteria and that type of thing, because if you take your mask off to eat on a bus, you're still in pretty close proximity. So we don't want to encourage the spread there, because a lot of people have, when you eat and things, just you forget to put your mask back on. So we would do it that way with the prepackaged or the packaged food from a restaurant or something like that, or something from our cafeteria, just not homemade food brought in like we used to do, especially with some of the larger teams to feed them.
And students could bring their own foods and snacks. We're just saying like a parent cooking for the whole group.
But are we still going to feed our kids before they go to compete? Then how are we paying for this? Are we going to ask parents to sponsor and donate, or are we going to, is this included in the $60,000 price tag we were given earlier?
ADs felt like that, typically they felt like parents would probably volunteer through the boosters because they normally take turns cooking meals for the kids and preparing them. So they did not think that was going to be an issue. And they felt that it was very important that kids eat before they go to away games for energy and all of that. And I would say that I'm speaking for the team, and we did not talk about it other than it was important enough that if we had to look to assist with some of that funding, I think we could do that with the money we saved in winter sports. But I think the ADs felt like parents and booster clubs would support that, or kids could bring their own, sandwich.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm just looking at I want to get it out there.
Sure.
What the expectations will be for this. So if a parent does volunteer, and I'm assuming with the new protocols, we can't go, I'm not giving any one pizza place any promos, but we can't go to a pizza joint in town and come out with large pizzas for the kids to divide. If we do that, they have to be like the individual single pizzas, and they have to be in their own wrappings, and everything has. What about, and again, I'm just looking at, and I know this is ridiculous, but I know we'll be asked questions and get this clarified. What about French fries? I mean, they're all loose in their bags. How strict are we going to get with this?
We want them to eat baked chips because it's healthier. So we.
I get it, but I mean, I know that something small like this always becomes big.
Yeah, I think we could work through all of that. So let's say that we decided cheeseburgers and French fries. McDonald's packages them individually and we just hand a bag to every kid.
Okay, that
That's
works.
different than everybody going through and touching or one person serving and things like that.
Okay, and I understand the water bottle thing with the one where they're allowed to bring their personalized water bottle and one bottle refill, or they'll be supplied one refill. Could they bring their own refill? Say if a kid wanted to fill up a milk jug and put his name on it to fill up his water bottle from, could he do that?
Yeah, I think if a student brings multiple water bottles with their names on it or so forth, the idea was that we just didn't want other people filling up water bottles and so forth. So if they bring extra with just their name on it and so forth, then they could access that. The idea behind the single use is it's one and done. You drink it and throw it in the trash. You're not sharing anything and so forth. So, but yeah, if a student were to bring 2 water bottles with their name or a large water, that's fine.
Okay, so they can bring their own fill-up bottles. So I'm assuming too that the athletic programs would appreciate donations of water bottles from the parents. I'm putting a plug in.
Well, the key is the 8 ounce, the single, because we don't want the big ones, and it's just smaller 8 ounce single.
So they just have to be the little baby bottles.
Yeah, the baby bottles.
Yeah, the
Okay.
football team was very concerned because they'll take a couple swigs and set it on the sidelines, and they didn't want it to be, so it's drink it, throw it, and smaller bottles work better.
Okay, understood. Now, when you talked about the additional coaches that when you talk about the middle school coaches coming over and helping out with varsity, is there a maximum limit to the number of coaches that we can have on a sideline to where at some point in time, if we have too many coaches, they would be considered the spectators?
No, the VHSL just says be reasonable. You will have 10 to 12 football coaches on the sideline. That's typical. So the VHSL has said, just be reasonable with the number of coaches you have there. But no, they have not set a limit. And coaches do not count as spectators. They're considered essential. And that's the same thing for essential workers. If we determine we need extra workers for keeping people distance and those type of things, we can have those, and they do not count as far as a spectator.
Okay, I think I'm done for right now.
Mr. Chairman?
Dr. Mealy, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Dr. Woodford that as she brings some of this information back about 6th and 7th graders, especially Mrs. Kirby's suggestion to do it on Saturdays, that the team also explore the equity piece of that. I think it's really important not just to be able to have it, but that there is access for any child who wants to play or practice.
Yes, ma'am. I will make sure we talk about that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Hicks, yes, sir.
I would just like to say that I think this plan that the team has come up with is very well thought out and has covered most of the bases. I would be much more comfortable with it if we had the volleyball players wearing masks. I think since that is still an indoor sport that needs to take place, that the girls need to wear the mask all the time.
Even the opposing team, Dr. Hicks?
Preferably, yes, but if the opposing team says that we're not going to play if we have to wear masks, then I think masks for our home team would be the very minimum that we would do to protect our players.
Great. Other questions?
I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman. I've got just a comment, and I just want to, revisit the whole JV piece of it. I think we've established through the conversations that we've had this evening that allowing JV competition is within our span of control, and therefore I think it needs to be part of this proposal because these kids are a year or two away from varsity, and if we deny them the developmental years, that may likely impact their ability going forward to get scholarships, athletic scholarships, and things of that nature. I mean, I think we owe it to these kids to give them this opportunity.
Mr. Chairman.
Terreston, yes, ma'am.
It's just another clarification for Dr. Francis, please. You had mentioned earlier regarding JV that the team has a modified plan. I want to be just clear on the suggested modified plan for JV. So you're looking at JV practice and perhaps maybe JV playing within the county,
Right.
among each other. So those are the areas that the team has recommended for JV.
Yes, those are the ones that not with the whole team. We did discuss this very extensively. I think the team felt like practice for JV they could probably do, but they were concerned about no competitions. So the idea was presented about in county, which we did talk with Ms. Smith in transportation, since we can control that and we can control how our teams kind of follow protocols, that we felt like we could make that happen. So that's—
Thank you, Dr. Francis. I certainly think it's very important that as a board, we take the team's plan and what they have certainly worked on and have talked among themselves and have looked at every angle as to what is really safe and best for the students. And so in this case, the modified plan that the team has recommended in terms of JV playing within the county among ourselves, I would be in support of that.
I would agree, Mr. Chairman. I just think that this team has put in a lot of time, and I'd be a little bit hesitant to override some of their concerns unless they had a chance to come back together and change their decision. But obviously a lot of work has gone into this, and I think I'm not sure it's prudent for us to override what they've suggested. I just want to say too, to the team members that are present here, that I think you did an excellent job with this. Thank you for all the hard work you put into this. It clearly was carefully thought out and well constructed, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it. So thanks to all of you for your efforts with it.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hill, yes, sir.
Yeah, I would certainly support inter-county play for the JV teams, but I would also like to consider allowing away teams to come to us, which reduces transportation, if at all possible.
And I think that's something we can look at. It's not something we can guarantee, but it's something that Dr. Francis can talk with and see if that's even possible.
Also, I would like to ask, as far as spectators at outdoor sports, did VHSL hand down a maximum number for outdoor sports?
Are you asking a maximum number of spectators?
Yes, I want to know where did we get do we have a maximum number of spectators for outdoor sports?
Of what we said for the fall would be basically the cheerleaders. The maximum number is based on your MEL, master eligibility list. So if you have 50 players on your MEL, you get 2 spectators by the governor's order and the VHSL's order of 2 spectators per player. So if you had 50 players on your master eligibility list, you could go up to 100 spectators for the home team. And then basically you would give 2 tickets to the visiting team based on their MEL. If they had 60 players on their MEL, they would get 120 tickets. That's the maximum. But they were clear that you could set restrictions and lower that based on your school board's decision. And what our team came up with was we wanted the sideline cheerleaders to come in. So if a squad had 20, we would allot 20 tickets to the other. Squad had 15, we would allot 15. So we're not going to the maximum that's allowed.
So would there be any consideration to allow at least the seniors to have 2 spectators per player?
One of the
do that safely with social distancing.
Yeah, one of the modifications that I said that we could look at was to have one game as designated as a senior night. And what would happen is the seniors would get 2 guests that could come. So what happens with that is, say if you had 10, let's say you had 20 seniors on your team, they would be allowed 2 spectators per senior. That would be 40. You would then have to give the visiting team 40 tickets, and they can bring parents or whatever. But I did put in the possibility of that being a modification to identify one game as a senior night, allow those parents to come in, and that the schools would have to submit a proposal how they were going to do that safely and securely and monitor that. So that was in one of the modifications along with the JV, additional JV and play inter-county.
Dr. Francis, can you just update the board on the Pixelot? That might help that we have the streaming services and when they'll be up.
Okay, Pixelot, we have signed the contract. I've been in touch with them. We have a walkthrough scheduled on February 9th at all 3 schools and the gyms and the stadiums. A local company, ITG, is doing the installation. The goal is to have it installed by February 22nd. So we're hoping to get all 3 stadiums and all 3 gyms with the installation, so it's up and running by February 22nd. Now that's based obviously on the company that we're working with, and they have us on the schedule. And as I said, we're doing the walkthrough on February 9th. I'm hoping that we can get this done, and so all the streaming will be available through the National Federation for the first play date on February 22nd.
Is that free to anyone that wants to watch that, Dr. Francis?
No, there is a small fee, but the great thing about that is if you pay the fee for the Federation streaming service with Pixelot, all of the other area schools are using it. So if you're, say, a volleyball game at EC Glass, they're using it there as well. So if you have it through our county, you can watch the away games as well. So all of the local school divisions, Lynchburg, Amherst, Campbell County, I think a lot in the Roanoke area, are all using Pixelot with the National Federation. So it is a small monthly fee, a subscription fee, but it's available all the games, not just home games.
How much is the fee?
I want to say it's around $6 or $7. It's less than $10, I think, for a month subscription. So.
Any other board questions for
Mr.
staff?
Chairman, I do have one more question, Mr. Chairman, for Dr.
Yes, ma'am.
Francis. Okay, you can't put away that water bottle yet. So Dr. Francis, just to clarify again for me regarding senior night, Mr. Hill had asked about that, and I certainly am very interested in that and would certainly like to see us support our seniors in that way. So can you just elaborate again for us?
Basically, what would happen is one game would be designated senior night. And what would happen is, obviously, the number of seniors you have on that team, you would then allow them 2 tickets. And basically, they put on the list who's coming. It could be a parent, could be a sibling, whatever. So they get 2 individuals to come. Then you give that same number of tickets to the visiting team. So if we have 20 seniors on a team, we give 40 tickets that night. So 40 tickets plus the cheerleaders, say, would be 55. We would give 55 tickets to the visiting team. They can bring whomever they'd like. If they want to bring their cheerleaders, if they want to bring their parents, whatever, then they get that many. But that would just be one game as dedicated as a senior night event. Now, on the volleyball, it's a little different because the max number of spectators is 25. So that means you can't go over the 25 limit for an indoor venue, but on the outdoor, it's 2 tickets per actually player.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Francis, with volleyball, would we allow the ADs to work with the coaches to provide, because if you've got 12 seniors and you can only get 25 in there, and you still got to give equal tickets to the other team. We need to be able to give our athletic director some wiggle room how to work through that to make sure the senior parents are able to come.
Yeah, on volleyball, what I think we would have to look at, it would be unusual to have that many seniors, but I guess you could if the majority of your team was seniors. We talked about if you had a situation like that, you'd probably do it over 2 nights, half the seniors for one game and half for the other, because the number is only 25 there. But, typically, if you only have 4 or 5 seniors, it's not going to be an issue. If you have 10 seniors, it definitely could be.
I would just like to add that the reason we were trying to concentrate these events to one single night was that we recognized if we were increasing the number of spectators from what we were typically providing, we would certainly need increased operational support. And to be able to target that to a specific and scheduled single event it is better in terms of being able to add adequate folks at intake, adequate folks to monitor crowds and seating, for cleaning and sanitizing purposes. So that just wanted to, it was really about managing those mitigation procedures and being able to concentrate some additional staff for that event.
That was actually my question as well, why senior night was one particular night instead of maybe spreading it out over a series of nights, but that makes sense. And I presume that the preference would be to have that earlier in the season, and it would not necessarily be the last game of the season, home game of the season, as is often the case, in case, God forbid, something happens.
Talked about allowing administrators to, to work with them and to have a plan on when that would be, Obviously, how they would be able to mitigate and handle the additional parents and not just for our team, but for the opposing side. So we would let them work. And I think that addresses Mr. Hill's question too about some flexibility to determine, you know, how many we have. If we have too many, how we're going to space it out so that everybody got an equal opportunity. But it's preferable if we can do it all on one night to do that. And our administrators will work together to submit a plan for that.
Can I ask another question?
Please, Ms. Kirby, yes.
With, and I'm getting the whole spectator thing, and of course, the main field I know is Liberty's football field. And I understand going into the stadium and I'm getting all this. But what's to prevent somebody from bringing their folding chair out and sitting it up on the bank in the end zone outside the stadium? Is that, and I'm not encouraging anybody to do that by any means, but I'm just saying, could, especially on senior night when you want to have extra people there, they're outside of the stadium. They're on the other side of the fence.
Just let them share French fries, Ms. Kirby.
Yeah, I know, but are we going to eliminate them from coming, or are we going to have somebody like running security to say that they can't be there?
Well, I think that that's part of what the principals ask, was for some support in helping with the management of crowds, especially if they get large. And I think that our hope with the community is that they will just support our athletes and try to be as positive and safe as possible so our athletes can play, and that they will help us in that realm, just to follow protocols and to not try to, you know, get around some of our mitigation.
Well, and I might add, if it's outside of the event, it then becomes a social gathering, which is defined differently in the executive order. So I think that would also help, because that's fairly clearly defined. So I think that would also help, because it's no longer connected to the event, which does have some variance for spectators.
And I think the VHSL addressed this. Anyone at the contest, because even outside the fence is still school property. Anyone at the contest has to be on the have to be on the list of people that are being allowed to come, and that's even from the visiting team. So basically, you don't just give tickets. You say 20 people can come, but their name has to be on the list, and they have to go through. If someone's standing outside the gate and their name's not on the list, then they're not supposed to be at that venue. And as I said, it's still school property. So because some schools raised that question about, you know, could 200 people come and stand outside the fence? It's no. If they're at the venue, they have to be on that will call list and be approved to be there.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Excellent. I believe I have probably spoken with Dr. Rogers at least once every day for the last week, and sometimes more than once, and other staff members as well. So I've been passing along ideas, questions, comments throughout. So I really don't have anything else to add tonight, other than just to thank Dr. Rogers and the team for the work that they did on this, getting that many people at the table, and from all aspects of the BCPS, from the principals to the athletic directors, bus drivers, custodians, teachers. I mean, that was quite an undertaking. And having served on a number of committees, getting 20 people to agree on something is probably a miracle in and of itself. So congratulations to the staff on that. And I know certainly it's not a plan that everyone is going to like every aspect of. It is a compromise after all. Someone I spoke with recently likened it to the old adage about lawmaking being like making sausage, that everyone loves sausage, but no one would like it if they actually watched it being made. And I think that probably is the case with this. There are pieces that we would all like to look different, but in the effort or the interest of getting athletics and health and safety all on the same page, I think this is an excellent starting point. So throughout tonight's discussion, I noted, I believe, 4 major areas that it sounds like the board would like to consider making modifications to the plan. And I don't know if Ms. Kirby wants to talk more about French fries, but otherwise, the 4 areas that I identified were masks for volleyball, senior night exemption for the spectator position, allowing JV to practice with potentially intra-county play, and also possibly, if things could work out, allowing additional competitions, whether that's having other teams visit or whatnot. And then finally, I believe B team practice at least, and I believe Dr. Woodford said that she would talk to the team more about that, if I remember correctly, or maybe not. Okay. So outside of those 4 areas, are we generally in consensus on the rest of the recommendation?
Yes.
I think more could, overall, I'm for it, but I think more could have been done for JV and especially middle school sports, considering that what all we've gone through as far as voting and supporting middle school sports. And I would like to reserve a spot on the regular meeting agenda to possibly come back and see if any progress has been made on the fact of JV getting more competitions, and have that presented to us so we can get them more games if possible, and see what headway the athletic directors have made with scheduling. And I'd like to have a presentation of if anything has been done to get B team at least practicing. Or middle school, I'm sorry, it's not B team anymore. But I would like to have that reserved on the regular meeting agenda, please.
You can add that as a staff report.
And could we also,
Mr. Johnson?
I noticed Dr. Francis cringes every time Ms. Kirby says B team, so.
Well, cringe, but we need to get these kids playing.
Middle school.
Middle school.
The term, yeah, the term, not the concept, but the term.
Yeah, we need to get these kids playing. And if personally, I think that we need to examine if we're going to vote tonight on resuming sports, which I'm assuming we are, I think we need to limit it to possibly just voting on the fall sports and reserving spring sports, because we're going to have a whole different gamut come spring, especially with the vaccine coming out, being made readily available. And the more people that get vaccinated and the more confidence is built up, we're probably going to be looking at spring in a whole different light.
Well, having said that, can't we revisit that?
That would be my preference to revisit it.
The spring aspect of it, can't we just go ahead and consider that this evening, and then with the option of revisiting depending upon future developments as far as vaccines and so forth.
Just
absolutely.
Sure,
and Dr. Rogers,
and
Dr. Rogers, I believe you said that the plan has built into it the component that this could be scaled up in the spring based on conditions without board action, correct?
Absolutely, it can be scaled up, and we certainly could bring that back at the March meeting if you like, because that's still well ahead of spring sports. Or we can just move forward if you think it, if we are able to scale it up, however you want to handle that. But that caveat is in the plan right now, that as we get the vaccinations and perhaps we have more drivers, we have more availability, that we can certainly add to the plan.
But we're still going to get an update at the February 18th meeting as far as momentum that we've made toward transportation and getting JV football and volleyball more competition, correct?
The February 18th meeting will have a staff report on middle school practice and the JV football competition schedule. Is that
Thank you.
correct? Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Chair,
Mr. Hill, yes.
yeah, I want to verify that what we're voting on tonight confirms that JV football can at least play inter-county at this time.
That was a modification that we suggested, that Dr. Francis suggested in his presentation.
And that would be JV, all volleyball, all JV competitions.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, through most of the meeting, I haven't really been able to understand Mr. Hill. He comes in very, very slowly, like he's speaking slowly. What did he say? I'm so sorry, I didn't get that.
Mr. Hill wanted to confirm that if we vote on the plan tonight, that it would provide for JV practice and intra-county competition.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. So if we approve the plan as it was, that would not include that. So we would have to vote separately on the modifications, correct, Dr. Rogers?
I think that's correct, to make sure that
Okay.
everybody's clear.
Okay. So why don't we talk or spend a few minutes discussing the four kind of areas that it sounds like we would like to visit separately, and then we can move on from there. So the first one, in no particular order, masks for volleyball. How do we feel about that proposed modification to the existing recommendation?
I'm in favor of it.
I am too.
I agree.
I'm in favor of mask on the sidelines, but not while you're playing. As an option when you're playing, let it be optional to the player.
If it gets these kids on the court, yes, I'm in favor of it.
All right, and I support that as well. So I think we have consensus on masks for volleyball. Now, do we want that to be for Bedford County athletes only, or do we want that for any visiting volleyball team as well?
Bedford County only.
I would say the visiting team only because I think the our team at a disadvantage, or I think people can view it that way.
I think
would like to
that
add
we should at the very least ask the visiting team to wear masks for volleyball games.
If our kids are wearing them, the competition needs to wear them as well.
Yes,
Agreed.
agreed.
I agree.
Right, so all volleyball players, Bedford County and visiting teams should wear masks during play. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a clarifying point? So
Yes, ma'am.
if the visiting team decides they don't want to play us because we're requiring masks, do we have the flexibility to continue on with that game, or do we, for whatever it's called, Dr. Francis?
It would be a no contest.
I just want to be clear so our ADs know what the board would like.
Well, I mean, that's something that's not going to occur on the floor. That's something we're going to know ahead of time. So,
Right.
And Dr. Francis,
So that's a no contest and not a four.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Dr. Hicks, what was that? You faded out.
I'm saying, just to be clear, if the opposing team decides not to play us, then that's a no contest and it's not a forfeit. Is that correct?
Correct. Any COVID-related issues that prevent you from playing, consider no contest.
Okay.
So this would be one. And so it would just, as Mr. Leamy said, this would be decided before the other visiting team arrived. We would have to let them know in our facility, you have to wear a mask or face covering to play. If they opt not to play, then it just goes as a no contest, and we'd have to try to reschedule someone else in that spot.
All right.
But Dr. Francis, you would know that well ahead of time, correct? Like if you were going to play school X, would somebody be contacting them to say, by the way, our rules are you have to wear a mask playing volleyball. So it's not like they're going to come and then find out. They would know that beforehand, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So we're not going to end up in Florida and find out that that our game has been canceled, right?
Right.
Okay. Excellent. Senior night. How do we feel about making that modification to the recommendation to allow senior night in its various iterations for volleyball versus the other sports?
Mr. Chairman, I would agree.
I'm in favor of that.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
You have to have senior night.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Got to
Okay.
recognize them.
Absolutely. Okay. So senior night and then specific guidelines to be determined by principals and athletic directors in consultation with administration.
And the coaches.
And the coaches, yes, yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Mealy, yes, ma'am.
Would the people who were part of the committee, who's going to look at that and do some approval of that or just some review of it? Because you want one school to be able to do what another school does. I mean, you don't want one school saying, well, you can't do this, but the other school does. You want some sort of, again, equity there, that we're all kind of doing the same thing. It might look differently, but we're all have these certain aspects to senior night. So who would be looking at these plans after the schools have developed them?
So we have had this situation with other activities, and typically it's shared with Dr. Francis as the director. And then he talks to Mrs. Robertson and I, and we kind of go through the plan to make sure we're meeting our own health and safety guidelines and our own mitigation. So I think that would be the way we would recommend it to Dr. Francis, and then he follows up with us and we go through it together.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good plan. That's a good plan.
So, okay. JV. So the modification that has been proposed is allowing JV teams to practice and play intra-county. And then it sounds like there was an additional recommendation from the board that we investigate the possibility of inviting other teams in or seeing how much flexibility there might be there with the scheduling, or perhaps we start out with intra-county competition and see how that goes, and then open it up more as conditions improve, vaccines, which begin next week, and transportation situation improves as well. So how do we feel about the recommended modification to JV sports?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question first. Are we going to bring that back to the committee first to have them weigh in on that? I just like to know how staff feels about that.
Wasn't that a recommended committee modification, Dr. Francis?
I believe the inter-county play is fine with the 3 high schools that we talked about. I think that was something that the 3 high schools were fine with. The extra part of this is bringing in just a way of teams coming in and playing. We did not discuss that. So we did talk about the inter-county play as a possibility.
And I think that would go back to the committee, just to talk about protocols for mitigation and all of that.
I'm sorry, Dr. Woodford, could you say that again?
I was just saying, I think anything additional to that, we would want to take back to the committee just to get their feedback. And we would do that before we brought the staff report to you back in February, on February 18th.
But if we're having teams come in to play our varsity team, what's the problem with bringing teams in to play our JV teams? Can somebody explain that to me?
Again, I think it goes back to the ability that they felt for mitigation, and they may be fine with it. It's not something we talked about. I just want to honor their work and go back and have that conversation with them if it's something we feel like we can do with other teams.
I think that's wise.
Yeah.
And just as, if I may follow up to what Dr. Woodford shared, it is the operational boots on the ground that are required when we're sponsoring an event. That doesn't look like it used to. It requires a good deal more staff support to manage the components of this plan. We also are recognizing that anytime we're increasing the interactions on campus, we're increasing the opportunity for exposure. And I feel it's one of the things I feel it's my responsibility to make sure gets communicated tonight, because we do have people listening. We have talked a lot about the opportunities that are ahead of us with the vaccine, and we are hearing that we are trying to open up opportunities for our students. The reality is that since our last report to the board on the number of cases we've had 91 cases of COVID positive in Bedford County schools since January the 14th. That's not a significant number when you look at, that is a significant number when you look at our totals. That's about 20 to 27% for students and staff of our totals in just that small amount of time. We are still in a very critical period, which is why we were so conscientious with mitigation management and strategies, and why we are trying to open opportunities as much as we feel we safely can. We are not out of the woods, and our data is telling us that. So I am asking for people to please. I know with the vaccine and these opportunities, it's starting to feel like things are opening up, but we have to still have a high level of caution for the next few weeks.
Thank you for your input, Ms. Robertson.
Well, again, I just think that the committee has taken a lot of time with this, and I think a modification like that needs to go back to the committee to ensure that we can do something like that safely.
For tonight, I would recommend that we look at what modification we feel like we can comfortably do. JV practice with inter-county play. Then for February the 18th, as Ms. Kirby requested, we'll have time before then to talk with the larger team and see what the recommendation would be as far as going beyond that, and even what even if it was possible in the schedule. So I would say if we could just look tonight when we're trying to vote on this at what we've already recommended for a modification, and then we have more time to consider all the other pieces to that, the suggestions tonight, and whether or not that we feel comfortable and our larger group feels comfortable being able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So would we have consensus then to move forward with allowing JV practice and inter-county play for now, and then allow the committee to huddle again on allowing external competition, and then revisit that in a future meeting?
I
Yes,
would,
for me.
Mr. Chairman, I agree.
Okay. Excellent. All right, and then the last issue that I believe we identified was B-team/middle school practice and/or competition.
I would just have to say that I would not be comfortable with making any modifications right now to middle school without the committee's total input. And I'm also happy to add the middle school ADs to that conversation and the middle school principals. I just have to say that obviously it's the board's wish, but I would really like to get some input from the team and add the middle school staff, because I know that was a concern from Mrs. Kirby that the middle school ADs weren't there. So
I believe
Yeah,
we
I think
already,
that's a good decision. I think we can again, bring that team together. More heads are way better than just a few.
and I believe we
I agree
already
with
agreed to bring that back to the February 18th meeting as part of the staff report. So we could leave that off now for now, and then see how what the staff recommends on the 18th.
I would like to keep it there as a contingent report saying that. I want it on the record that I'm asking for a report to see if we can proceed with it.
All right, so if there is agreement on the board.
Then that's all I want. I want a report to see if it can be done and how we can do it, and go at it positively to try to make it happen instead of constant excuses of why it can't.
Okay, so it sounds like we have agreement to ask staff to take that back to the committee to see how they feel about that, and then present their findings at the February 18th meeting. So,
Exactly, and ask the middle school athletic directors to be involved.
okay, great. All right, so Dr. Rogers, it sounds like at our February 18th meeting, we will be discussing middle school practice as well as JV competition.
JV schedule, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So those two pieces will be revisited in a couple of weeks when we are together again in person. And otherwise,
Mr. Chairman,
it's like,
may I clarify one thing real
ma'am.
quick, please? And also too,
Please.
when you're talking about middle school, the athletics for the middle school, and I know you just said them practicing. If we can't do the practice, I still would like to have the option of clinics or some type of activity for the middle school to see what would be feasible, not just limited to practice, but to see
Okay.
what options we can provide to these kids.
And I have that down from your previous discussion.
Thank you.
Yes.
great. All right, so with those two coming back in a few weeks, it sounds like tonight we are good to move ahead with requiring the wearing of masks in volleyball, permitting senior nights in accordance
Chairman.
with plans submitted by the schools to administration, and allowing our JV teams to practice and play within Bedford County.
All right, and we are going to get the transportation update too, to make for possibility of further travel. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right.
Mr. Johnson, I have a question.
Mr. Hill, yes, sir.
On the volleyball having to wear masks and requiring it for the opposite team, if they choose not to play, how does that affect our volleyball teams for playoff?
It is considered a no contest, so it's not a loss or win, but it could reduce the number of games for a team potentially if someone refused to compete based on that.
But would it keep our teams from reaching playoff status?
I really can't answer that because each region has different metrics for how some it's all in, some it's based on the top 8, some it's based on win percentage. Some has a minimum number of games you have to compete in. So it'd be hard to answer that. If it's an all-in, obviously it does not. But if it were on a number of wins, it may. Winning percentage, if you play fewer games, if you have a loss, it does count more against you than if you have more games. So.
Can you bring that on the 8th as well for us to revisit so we understand how our decisions are impacting these teams?
I didn't quite get that question.
So, Jason, I'm fine with, voting to require it tonight. However, I want to understand how it affects the teams. I would like more information on that on the 18th.
I guess, yes. I guess we could bring back if anyone has indicated that they would not play based on that guideline. So the ADs can check with the schools that they will have scheduled to play and see if anyone has said that they would not play based on that requirement at our facility.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a clarifying question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
With the mask requirements for volleyball, I understand that we can mandate them in our home gyms. What are we going to do when we travel to another school? And I understand that we're going to mandate our teams to wear them, but are we not going to go to that school if the other team says they're not going to wear their mask on their home court, where they have that judgment call?
I would say no, we would still play, but
That's what I would say, but I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
I think that's,
we can't mandate a home court rule.
I think that's up to each school, but I don't know that anyone would choose not to play if they went to another venue, because realistically, if our teams make the region, okay, they would be playing against teams that did not wear mask or face coverings, because that can't be required at the regional or the state semifinal or finals.
Yeah.
Right. So unless there are any final questions, Dr. Rogers, how would be the best way to proceed with this?
Perhaps you could make a motion that included all of these, or we could do it with a motion for the plan as submitted with each individual modification.
Okay.
And according to Robert's Rules of Order too, does it have to be someone who voted no last time to make the motion?
I don't believe so, because this is a totally different plan and we're talking about different seasons.
Correct. Anybody can do it.
So unless there's any final discussion, do we have a motion? Or would anyone like to make a motion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I would go ahead. Dr. Maley.
One of you, please make a motion.
I would like to move that we approve the plan tonight with the modifications that were presented and agreed to.
All right. Do we need to specify which modifications?
You would just summarize them quickly so we're all on the same page and make sure we're all in agreement.
Okay. With the modification that our volleyball team wear masks at all times. And that our JV teams be allowed to practice and play inter-school competition. And those are the only two that we agreed on, I believe.
Senior nights.
Senior night.
Senior night, and that we allow parents to attend as spectators on senior night.
All right, so we have a motion from Dr. Hicks to accept superintendent's recommendation with modifications of requiring the wearing of masks during volleyball, allowing JV sports teams to practice and play within the county, and also allowing senior night. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, so motion by Dr. Hicks, second by Dr. Mealy. Any final discussion? All right, hearing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the recommendation as modified is approved unanimously. And at the February 18th meeting, we will hear more on middle school sports, JV competition outside of Bedford County, and an update on the transportation situation.
And an update on the mask situation and teams, what we find out about other teams wanting to play. Yes, okay. We'll have those 4 updates.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, excellent. Well, that being all of the business items on our agenda tonight, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Great, I have a motion by Mrs. Kirby. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Second. Was that Dr. Mealy? I heard
yes.
An echo. Okay. Second by Dr. Mealy. Right. All those in favor of logging off, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right.
No.
1. Okay. So, Mrs. Johnson, would you please do your thing for this, please?
Hey, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the only reason I voted no is because I was hoping to be able to add conversation around possibly allowing our winter sports to play inter-county. But I didn't get a chance to ask the question, so that's why I said no.
Okay.
But just wanted to entertain that opportunity to at least do regionals and playoffs for these teams.
Okay. So unfortunately, we already have a motion on the floor, so we do have to take action on that unless anyone is wanting to withdraw the motion.
I'm willing to withdraw my motion so we can entertain the option.
Okay. Now, Dr. Rogers, though, I do believe that we could not, because it is not an item on the agenda, correct?
That is correct. We were not asked to bring a plan on winter sports, and that would have to be something that the original 4 that voted against it would have to bring back.
Okay. All right, so in light of that, Mrs. Kirby, is your motion still active?
Yes.
Okay. So, Ms. Johnson, would you please pull the board?
Mrs. Harrison,
Yes.
Dr. Hicks,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
No.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Leamy,
Yes.
Dr. Mealy,
Mic is off.
Yes.
Sorry, yes,
thank you, ma'am.
you're welcome.
The ayes have it with 6.
All right. In that case, we are adjourned. Have a wonderful evening, and we will be back together in person on February 18th.
Thank
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you all, especially central office people, for all your work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Drive safely.